Some stories don't wait for an introduction. They grab you by the heart from the first second. And Nick and Noah? Their connection wasn't slow or gentle. It hit like a spark in the dark, fast, hot, and impossible to ignore. From the moment their eyes met, something shifted. Something dangerous. Something that felt like it could either save them or destroy everything around them. Their story begins with a tension that you can almost feel in the air, the kind that pulls two people together before they even realize what's happening. Nick moves through the world with a calm, steady way of carrying himself, like he's always trying to keep his emotions locked tight. But Noah walks in like he owns the space without even trying. She is bold, unfiltered, and full of fire. So, when these two cross paths, the world around them seems to pause for a moment, as if it already knows what they're about to start. There's something familiar yet dangerous in the way they look at each other. Nick tries to keep distance, to protect himself from whatever he sees coming, but Noah's energy crashes into him like a wave. She's the kind of storm you can't run from. And maybe he doesn't really want to. Their first moments together aren't soft, they're charged. A simple exchange of words becomes a silent challenge. A passing glance becomes a promise neither one speaks aloud. People around them sense it too. They notice how the room changes when Nick and Noah stand too close. They notice the shift in the air, the tension that builds even when nothing is said. It's as if these two create their own gravity, pulling each other closer every time they try to step away. And maybe that's why their story feels so intense from the very start. It doesn't give them time to think, to breathe, to understand. It just pulls them in deeper, moment by moment. Nick knows he should walk away. Noah knows she should keep her distance. But sometimes two people meet and the world becomes too small to keep them apart. And that's exactly what makes their stories so powerful, the feeling that something unstoppable has already begun. It didn't start with a grand moment. It began quietly, so quietly that neither Nick nor Noah understood how fast things were changing. It was the small things first. The moments most people would ignore. A quick look held a second too long. A brush of fingers that should have meant nothing. A breath caught in the middle of a sentence. These tiny sparks were the beginning of a fire they didn't know was already spreading. Nick tried to stay in control. He always does. He watches the world with careful eyes, trying to read people before they can get too close. But Noah was different from the very first moment. She didn't hide behind walls or careful words. She walked right through every defense Nick had built over the years. She laughed in a way that made him look up without meaning to. She challenged him without even trying. And suddenly he found himself wanting to know what she would say next. What she would do next, what she was thinking behind those bold eyes. Noah felt the pull too. Even if she pretended she didn't, she wasn't the type to show softness. But the way Nick watched her made something inside her shift. She noticed the way he listened, even when she said something simple. She noticed the quiet strength in his voice. She noticed the way he tried to act unaffected when the truth was written all over him. And maybe that's what drew her in, the fact that he made her feel seen in a way she wasn't used to. Their first real spark came in a moment that wasn't meant to be special at all. A small disagreement, a playful tease, a line crossed, just enough to change everything. For a second, they stood too close. For a second, neither of them moved away. And in that small, stolen space between them, the world felt different, alive, warm, dangerous. They didn't touch. They didn't speak. But the silence said enough. Something had started. Something they couldn't undo. Something that felt like fate pulling them forward even when they weren't ready. And from that moment on, every time they saw each other, the air felt heavier, like it was holding a secret only they knew. If the spark was small at first, it didn't stay that way for long. Their story was already shifting from simple attraction to something far more intense. Something neither of them knew how to stop. There comes a point in every story when the line between almost and too far disappears. For Nick and Noah, that moment didn't arrive gently. It crashed into them like a wave they couldn't hold back. The air between them had been tight for days, full of words they didn't say and feelings they tried to bury. But desire has a way of pushing through every wall, every excuse, every warning. And when it finally happened, it didn't ask for permission. It began with a small argument, the kind that burns hotter than it should. Noah pushed like she always does, testing Nick's patience, his control, his limits. Nick tried to keep his voice steady, but something in him snapped, not in anger, but in longing he could no longer hide. The space between them disappeared in an instant. One step, one breath, and suddenly they were close enough to feel each other's heartbeat. Close enough for the truth to finally break free, their eyes locked and everything around them faded into nothing. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It wasn't a planned moment. It was the raw pull of two people who had been trying too hard to resist what was always meant to happen. Noah's breath trembled. Nick's hands clenched at his sides as if holding back the storm inside him. But the tension had grown too thick, too heavy. And, in that charged silence, they crossed the line they had been dancing around from the beginning. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, deep, messy, overwhelming. The kind of moment that leaves people changed. Noah felt her own walls crumble, the ones she swore she would never let anyone break. Nick felt years of restraint melt away, replaced by a heat he wasn't prepared for. Their connection wasn't gentle, it was intense, greedy, hungry for every second they had been denying. Time didn't exist in that moment. The world outside didn't matter. All that mattered was the electricity running between them, the heat that refused to fade, the gravity that kept pulling them in again and again. It was the moment when want became need, when attraction became something fierce and unstoppable, but passion never comes without consequence. As soon as the moment ended, they both knew something had shifted forever. They couldn't go back. They couldn't pretend it meant nothing. They had crossed the line, and now they would have to face everything that came with it. The fire between Nick and Noah didn't fade after that night. It grew heavier, deeper, almost impossible to carry. What once felt exciting now came with a weight neither of them knew how to hold. Every moment after crossing that line felt louder, sharper. The world around them didn't change, but they did. And that shift followed them like a shadow that refused to disappear. Nick felt at first the guilt, the confusion, the fear of wanting someone so intensely that it threatened the balance of everything he had worked to control. He tried to go back to being the calm, steady person he was before, but something inside him wouldn't let him. Every time he looked at Noah, he remembered the way she made him feel alive, reckless, unguarded, and that terrified him more than he would ever admit. He wasn't built for chaos, yet he craved her like she was the only thing that made sense. Noah felt the weight too, but she tried to hide it behind her usual fire. She pretended nothing had changed, but her eyes told a different story. She wasn't used to vulnerability. She didn't know how to handle tenderness without turning it into a fight. So she pulled back, then moved closer, then pulled back again, caught between wanting him and protecting herself from the part of him that could break her without even trying. Their connection became a silent battle neither wanted to fight. Moments that used to feel warm now carried a sting. Conversations became shorter. Glances became heavier. Every touch felt like a reminder of a truth they couldn't escape. Passion doesn't stay simple. It always asks for something in return. The world around them began to notice too. The tension, the hesitation, the way they avoided each other 1 minute and collided the next. It was clear that the fire they created had started to burn everything around it: trust, clarity, peace. What once felt like the beginning of something beautiful now felt like the edge of something dangerous, and still, neither of them could let go. Because despite the confusion, despite the fear, despite the damage, the pull between them didn't weaken. It stayed strong, stubborn, alive like a flame, refusing to die even when the wind tries its hardest to put it out. In the end, Nick and Noah learned the hardest truth. When two people burn this brightly, they don't just light up each other's world, they scorch it. And once everything is set on fire, nothing goes back to the way it was.